Hey everyone, it's Daniel with Petal Pickers. We're going to give everyone just a minute to jump on, but I'm taking over for Lisa today for the Gardener's Workshop Farm Ask a Flower Farmer Live. I'm here on my farm in South Carolina. We're zone 8A in South Carolina. We're in the upstate, so on a map we're directly in between Atlanta and Charlotte. And I'm standing in my peony field because right now we are on peony watch. We're harvesting peonies every day, and we're just so excited. They're coming up, and we're gonna harvest them all. We're gonna store them in our coolers until Mother's Day. And so that's when we sell all of our peonies here growing in the field. If you have questions for me, make sure you click on the little bubble with the question mark at the bottom of the screen. That's where I'm going to be able to see all of your questions that you submit. So go ahead and start typing away, and in just a couple minutes I'll check those and hopefully I can answer some of your questions. So it's been a beautiful week here on our farm. We've had perfect weather, so we're starting to get the irrigation hooked up on our cool flowers and everything around the farm because the ground's drying out. Earlier this week I started prepping the ground for our dahlias. So if you don't know about our farm, we kind of have started to focus and specialize in certain crops, and we just got through tulips and ranunculus. We actually still have a little bit of ranunculus blooming in our high tunnel, and now we have moved on to peonies, and we're already thinking about planting our dahlias. So dahlias are one of our main crops here on the farm. They kind of carry us through from the end of summer all the way until our first frost, usually at the end of October. And if you are interested in growing dahlias along with us this year, you can head over to our website, petalpickers.com. We still have some really good varieties available there, so make sure you check that out. All right, I see some questions are starting to roll in, so we're gonna go ahead and start with those. The first question is, what's the secret to growing ranunculus? I've tried several corms several times. No luck in upstate South Carolina. Well, that's where we are, Sasha. And ranunculus can be tricky. So I actually grew it. I tried twice and failed. And I grew those out in the open in our field. And then our third time was a charm. I purchased a high tunnel and they did really well under there. So it does depend on where you live across the country for growing ranunculus. What I always try to do whenever I'm trying a new plant is I look up where it naturally grows. So ranunculus comes from the Mediterranean climate where they are really dry. I think during summers they're hot and dry, and then in the winters they're cool and wet. And so that's what we try to provide here when we're growing ranunculus. The trick with them is they're just not used to having wet feet. The wet soil, if it stays wet too long, it can rot your corms. So you have to give them excellent drainage. Raised beds are a great way to grow ranunculus if you don't have a high tunnel, but you're gonna wanna add some kind of plastic covering over your ranunculus to really mitigate any loss from rot. So in South Carolina, we have found that high tunnels really help us to provide that environment very easily. And like I said, try to cover it with something, because in South Carolina we have wet winters. So that's when we have a lot of rain and the ground just does not dry out. Hope that helps. All right, next question. How to prevent powdery mildew. Last year, one of your bushes was so bad infected. I'm not sure what plant you're talking about, but in general, powdery mildew is very common, especially here in the humid South. We deal with it on many different crops. Zinnias come first to mind. There's a couple ways you can go about it. We usually do not spray anything on our zinnias, because what we do with those is we just succession plant them. So that means that we plant fresh zinnia seeds about once a month here on our farm, and we already have our first round growing. It's about time for us to start round 2, and those crops are going to get powdery mildew. It's going to totally cover the plants of all the zinnias, and right when it starts to get bad, we're just going to mow that crop down, and then our second succession should be blooming by the time we mow the first one down. So that way we continuously all summer have fresh zinnias. We also get powdery mildew pretty bad on some varieties of our dahlias, and that is something that I like to treat because we're in it for the long haul with dahlias. We plant them in early summer and then we're not stuck with them. We love them, but they are here all the way until our frost date. So we do want to treat that. I have used horticultural oil and I've sprayed my plants with that. If you're using that, you want to make sure you spray it on your plants at night or in the evening when the sun's not hitting them, because it can burn or fry your plants. Just like if you were laying in the sun with oil all over you, it would fry you too. So that's one way. That's kind of a preventative. That's not going to cure powdery mildew once you have it. There's fungicides that you can choose to use if you want to go that route. Mills Stop is one that specifically targets powdery mildew, and so you can apply that to your plants. And then we've had good luck with Xerotol, which is certified organic. It's a hydrogen peroxide based product. And also you would not want to apply that during the middle of the day. You usually don't want to apply anything to your plants during the middle of the day if the sun is shining on them. So just right before the sun goes down or first thing in the morning is a good time to apply. All right, next question. My 3 favorite dahlias. This is from Wesley. That's my husband. If you want to follow him at Farm Shenanigans, you can see more about the other businesses that we run, and he has remodeled our house and does a lot with interior design and home decor. So check him out. My top 3 favorite dahlias right now are Jowie Winnie. That is a coral ball shaped dahlia. It just produces nice, tall, sturdy stems, and it is beautiful. I've never had enough of it. Peaches and Cream is number 2. It's also gorgeous because it can be used in wedding work. It's just like the name, Peaches and Cream. There's an orange undertone, but it's kind of a blush color, and it's super productive. That is one of our most productive dahlias that we grow on our farm, and it's also an early bloomer. So if you take cuttings of it and plant those out, Peaches and Cream will be one of the first dahlias to bloom on your farm or in your yard during the summer. And so that's just a great one. Its tubers store well over winter. There's a lot of great attributes when thinking of the best. And then Blizzard is my number 1. It is a white ball dahlia, and it's just, again, very productive. You get tons of tubers off of it when you dig it up in the winter and divide it. So you can just start with a couple tubers of Blizzard, and after a season or 2, you're going to be giving them away to your friends or selling your dahlia tubers if you choose to go that route. So next question, my peony roots were planted in the fall and they're just peeking through the soil, zone 3B. Should I start watering them? My last frost date is May 21st. Okay, so peonies, I don't know anything about Zone B. I've never even visited anywhere that is Zone B, so I'm clueless, but it makes sense. I'm sure your season's going to follow through ours. Right now, you may still have snow on the ground, or it may have just melted, and your ground is going to be very saturated. Your peonies really don't need water until it starts to get warm and your ground completely dries out. So if you did just plant them last fall, that is something you want to be thinking about, and you want to go in and get a plan for how you're going to irrigate them, or if it's just 1 or 2 plants, make sure you're going to be watering them during the summer when it really heats up. And for us, I'm thinking like in the 80s. When you get to that point, start checking on your peony plant. But right now, I'm pretty sure it doesn't need any water in Zone 3B. So, but make sure, it's very important the first year when you're getting your peony roots established that they have adequate water. It's very easy when they're not blooming. You're kind of done with peonies. Honestly, like we just turn our heads and never even look at this hill that's right behind me again until winter, and when we come to clean them up. So make sure you get irrigation on them and you'll be in good shape. Peonies are very hardy. So it's going to be hard to kill it unless you just totally neglect it. All right, next question. Once your ranunculus is out of your hoop, have you ever planted dahlias in your hoop? What else do you plant in your hoop? So we sourced all of our high tunnels. If I turn, you can see them. We have a row of 5 right there. And then if we keep going, we have 5 more there. They're all 100 feet long Farmer's Friend high tunnels. And that company who we've sourced all them from, those have worked very well for us. We don't get really strong wind. We don't get a lot of snow. It's actually snowed every year that I can remember up in winter up until this year. I did not see a single snowflake at all. And I think the only place I saw it was over Christmas in Memphis, Tennessee, but it wasn't actively snowing. It had snowed before we got there. So anyways, you know, I'm from the South. I love to see a good snow. Okay, so we have planted dahlias in our hoop house before. I don't need to do that, is kind of what I determined. I planted probably 500 or 600 feet worth of dahlias in our high tunnels, and it made them get really tall. Then we had a tropical storm blow through in September, October, and even though they were netted, it just made a mess with the strong winds because the stems were thinner and the plants were so tall. So I didn't like that. We also had an outbreak of a bug that was very hard for me to kill. I started just spraying, not anything. I was looking at different chemicals and reading the label, but it's like it said it would kill it and then it just would not die. I think the infestation was that bad. And so that was another concern. Whenever you're enclosing something somewhere and you have an outbreak of a pest, it is a lot harder to manage it sometimes, or it can be. And I couldn't use tractor implements to dig up those dahlias. So we have a potato digger that we use to dig up all of our dahlia tubers at the end of the season. And in the field, that's very easy for me to do. And in a high tunnel, we still had to dig them all by hand. So I didn't like that aspect either. We had powdery mildew. That can be a big issue if growing in a tunnel with dahlias. And I think we just kept treating that and we kind of held it back. But I think that's all the issues I saw. I think that's going to be more determined in your climate. So if you're in a colder climate and you might want to plant them in a high tunnel, you're probably not going to have as high as humidity and they might end up doing really well for you. Also, high tunnels are easy to order a shade cloth and put on top of. So if you need to add a little bit of shade, if you're in a very hot climate, you may consider doing that for your dahlias as well. But we found we don't need them. I don't even use shade cloth on any of our dahlias, and the trick I have found to growing the best dahlias is that nobody waters them in the summer like they really want to be watered. So the way we have learned to irrigate our dahlias is to turn on our drip tape irrigation at the end of the day, and we let it run overnight for at least 12 hours per field, and we just absolutely drench our dahlia field with water, and we will do that a couple times a week if necessary. It just depends if we're getting any rain or not. All right, next question. Let me answer the last one real quick too. What all do we grow in our high tunnels? We grow anemones, scented geranium, celosia. We've done dahlias, didn't really care for that. We have lisianthus in there, ranunculus, butterfly ranunculus, delphinium, eucalyptus, snapdragons. Orlea was new for us this year. They did very, very well in a high tunnel, and it made it so much more productive, and it's twice as tall. And most things do better in a high tunnel, so especially the cool annuals over winter. All right, next question. Zone 4-5 in Vermont. Can I transplant my butterfly ranunculus into the ground now, or do I need to wait until it's warmer? I heard butterfly ranunculus are not as hardy as regular ranunculus. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. We do grow butterfly ranunculus, but like I said before, zone 4 and 5, I'm not sure I've even visited those places. And So that's a totally different climate. We fall plant our butterfly ranunculus and it hangs out in our high tunnels with the sides open all throughout winter unless we're getting really cold. This last winter during Christmas, we did get the cold blast. We didn't get any snow, but our farm got down to 6 degrees last winter, and that is the coldest in the last 8 years that it's gotten. In the summertime, we can get up to 100. Usually we hang out around 90 degrees for a large portion of the summer. But should you transplant your butterfly ranunculus? I just think that you need to look at your forecast and see how cold you're going to get. If you're going to get below like 28, you may want to have a game plan as far as like putting agribon or frost cloth to cover your butterfly ranunculus, because it really doesn't like it down in the mid to lower 20s. So I hope that helps. It also not determines, but it depends on how large your ranunculus or butterfly ranunculus is. If it's a larger plant, then it's not going to be able to handle the cold as much as a smaller plant would. So hopefully that helps. All right, your ranunculus are coming up small and deformed. I know it could be a few reasons, but I'm leaning towards malnutrition. What can I do this late stage to get them, this is the last effort to get them going? Okay, the first thing I would ask you is, are you watering your ranunculus enough? It's a fine line. You do not want to overwater them, but if they are struggling and you know that the soil maybe has been really dry in there, you may want to really go and give your ranunculus a good drink. I know I underwatered a crop of ranunculus and it was delayed by blooming about 2 weeks, and it's about half the height of the rest of my ranunculus that we had this season. So even I experienced that, but I know for sure 100% that was caused because I did not water them enough. If you're trying to give it some fertilizer, you can, you don't want to do anything granular at this point. I would spray something directly on the plants. So if you want to do an organic fertilizer, that's your choice. You could use fish emulsion or kelp to give it some nitrogen. And if you wanted to use a synthetic, I would just start with 10-10-10, which is like a basic fertilizer, and just see where that gets you. Maybe some Miracle Grow that you can buy real quick and then water on top of your ranunculus. But that's what I would try first. All right. Next question, what are your favorite woodies for foliage? So actually, this is something I need to work on my farm. I do a lot of bulbs and perennials and annuals, and I have a section that I finally decided, this is year 7 for me growing on our farm. I purchased the farm 8 years ago, and then I kind of waited a year and rehabbed the farm, and then we've been growing for 7 years. I'm just now still figuring out key parts of my farm. We're growing on 8 acres, so that was a lot of space for me to fill up, and now I'm kind of filling in the holes that we have. So 9-bark is an excellent one that everyone grows. I have a small patch of 9-bark and I like that. Elaeagnus is something that grows in our climate. I'm not sure where you live, but that's an excellent foliage. I've put in a lot of perennials, which is not a woody, but we love to grow Solomon seal, and that's coming up right now. So that is an amazing foliage addition to all of our bouquets in early spring when we still have stuff like ranunculus and peonies. And eucalyptus is what we grow a lot of on our farm. So eucalyptus is gonna not be ready this time of year unless it's successfully overwintered. So you may have to wait until like July, August, September before your eucalyptus is ready to be harvested. So it's good to have a balance between stuff you can use in early spring and stuff you can use later in the season. Next question, how do you cut peonies so that they produce more the following year? All right, so this is something that there's a lot of information going around. When you plant a brand new peony, you want to put it in the ground and let it come up, and you want to cut off any buds that it produces the first year. Just cut off a little inch the bud. That's it. Let the rest of the leaves and everything remain on the plant, because that's how it's going to get energy to grow its root system, so that the following year you have a larger plant. Well, that's year 1 and 2. So then at year 3, you're going to have an established peony plant, and it's going to be big and beautiful, and you're going to finally have like 5 stems per plant that you would be able to see bloom out. And the trick is to only cut the length of a peony stem to what you're going to use in either if you're making bouquets or if you're selling to florists or wholesalers. Like, there's a standard size, and I think sometimes people get excited and just cut the whole stem all the way down to the ground. They don't leave any of the extra leaves on the plant for it to produce more energy and a bigger root system for the following year. So the trick is just cut what you need, and if you continuously do that every year, you will see that your plants are getting bigger and bigger. I've heard other growers, especially I listen to people in the Alaska Growers Association for peonies. I think Wanda is Fox Hollow Peonies. I like to follow her on Instagram too, and I know that she's taken a lot of Lisa's courses with the Gardener's Workshop Farm, but she has great tips about growing peonies. I just saw some in her stories the other day, and I think you want to leave like maybe a third of your peonies on the plant. So you don't want to cut every flower on your plant every season, although I'm going to tell you, I cut every flower I can. I'm so greedy when it comes to peonies, and so maybe my peonies could be bigger if I didn't do that, but I don't know the difference, right? Because I have what I have, and the peonies are so pretty, I can't leave them on the plant. So next question, what temp do you hold your peonies at? Do you wrap them in anything? Yes. So like I said, I've been cutting peonies now for over a week. I probably have like 1,000 stems in my cooler. And what we're actually going to do this afternoon after this live is I'm going to have the employees start wrapping them and sorting them by variety. So we're going to store them in a bulb crate. We're going to line the bulb crate with landscape fabric, and that just kind of prevents like the fans in the cooler from drying out the peonies too much. And then we're going to like roll them up into bunches that will fit inside of a piece of craft paper, and that is as simple as we do it. I see people who do it more professionally than me, wrapping them in like insulation or wool, or I think it's one of those things that you just do what works for you, and that's the best way. I've always, for 5 years, wrapped our peonies in simple craft paper, or newspaper would be great if you still get the newspaper, and put them in the bulb crate. And then we have a little extra landscape fabric. When we line the crate, we have extra so that we can kind of cover the top of the crate, and then we just stack them in the cooler like that. And it has seemed to work great. We sell all of our peonies for Mother's Day, and so we're holding them sometimes anywhere up to 4 weeks, and we haven't had any issues with that. I think if you were planning on storing your peonies longer than 4 weeks, you would want to maybe perfect the system a little bit better than how we use it. But if you're just selling them on a weekly basis and really moving through them pretty fast, I think you can get away with less. So we keep our cooler as cold as we can at 34, 35 degrees, and that seems to keep the peonies really from opening up too much. All right, any tips on growing dahlias in the low country? Okay, it is kind of funny, right? And I'm sure a lot of states are like this, but South Carolina is kind of divided between 2 different climates. We're coastal, and then we're the upstate. And our farm's located in the upstate, right below the Appalachian Mountains. And so we're cooler in the evenings. That really helps our dahlias kind of hang through summer here on our farm, versus I know a lot of my grower friends down at the coast, it is tough for them to grow dahlias through summer. Like, they are really struggling because sometimes their nighttime temperatures will be around 80 degrees at night, and then here in the upstate, our nighttime temperatures are like around 69 or 70 degrees. So What are some tips? I think you're going to have to adjust your growing season just a little bit. I know currently right now there is a farm in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, right outside of there, and they have dahlias blooming. So they plant theirs very early in the season. They probably give it some protection. I'm not sure if it's in a high tunnel or a greenhouse where they can protect them from freezing, but that could be a good way. I also see people in Houston, Texas, some of these really hot climates that just get pounded during the summer with the heat. Their season looks very different than the rest of the country as far as growing dahlias. So the good thing is dahlias grow really well in a sandy soil. They love the good drainage, so that is a benefit to growing in the low country. All right, next question. Do peonies bloom their first year? Yes, they can bloom, and sometimes they don't. So just a couple days ago on my Instagram, I was showing you we planted 900 new peony roots that just like a month ago, I think. We had held them in our coolers because the ground wasn't ready for us to properly plant them. And then we finally got them planted, and I already see buds coming up on some of them, and some of them I don't. It doesn't really matter. Your first year, you're going to want to cut those buds off if you can. If you can stand to do it, it's just going to make your plant that much better next spring. If you need to see them bloom, maybe let a couple of them bloom and then cut the buds off the rest of them. But yep, just seeing one bud, I would even consider yourself lucky on the first season. It's going to get a lot better the next year, and then by year 3, you're going to be very, very happy that you planted them. And I think they're worth the wait. All right, what do you look for when harvesting parrot tulips? I've heard they need to be further along before harvesting. Yeah, I let the buds swell up so that I can see color. And the second you see them cracking open, then I think for your first few times growing them, that's a good time for you to harvest because you know they're going to open at that point. What I learned this season, we grew a lot of parrot tulips, and I love them so much. And it may depend on variety. We grew cabana and apricot parrot, and I started harvesting them as I was going along a little bit tighter and tighter, like through our season. We had tulips for 6 or 7 weeks this year. It was a long season for us because we went big on them. And I think you'll be surprised on tulips, like if they're more single like that, you can kind of harvest them a little bit earlier. If you have a double or peony style tulip, you're going to want to wait till that shows a lot of color and almost looks like it's cracking open before you harvest it. So hopefully that's a good tip. Once seedlings have been planted in the garden, when do you begin to give them some foliage fertilizer, and how often? Well, what we do on our farm, because we grow so many things, I really don't have time to pay attention to that, to everything we're putting in the ground. Like, hey, we just planted this, it's going to need fertilizer at this set time, or this. Like, I don't keep up with that. So I amend our soil with granular organic fertilizer when we are prepping our beds. So that's before anything's planted in there. We've already amended with like a chicken litter based organic fertilizer, or there's probably many different products that you could use. And that way, just from the rain, it kind of mixes it into the soil. And then when we go to plant and our plants grow roots down through the soil, they're able to gain nutrients. And we don't go back like we could and add a lot of extra fertilizer. I just find that most things really don't need it. So I know that doesn't answer your question, but just think about putting down a fertilizer before you plant, and then you won't have to worry so much like when to get stuff on a schedule. Outside of that, if you really wanted to get on a schedule with a certain crop, or you're small enough scale that you can focus on that, I would say like every week up until stuff starts to bloom. I find out most flowers, once you see the blooms starting to form and come, I usually cut off the fertilizer because you don't want the plant to grow more vegetatively than it should be, or grow so fast that the stems get thin. That can happen on some flowers. So once I start to see buds on a flower, I usually stop fertilizing it, besides what it can just naturally access in our soil. Next question, how do you store daffodils? So we dry stored daffodils this year in our coolers for a month, and it worked. So the key to this is the harvest time, the harvest stage of the daffodils. So it's called gooseneck stage, and it's like the bloom kind of like turns its head from up to crooked like that, and it's going to be a swollen bud. And if you pick the daffodil at that time, you're going to be able to hold it dry. We just put them in buckets. I think most things when you dry store them in the cooler, you want to have them laid horizontally, like in a bulb crate or something would be good. And then once you need it, you just pull it out, recut the ends, put it in water, and the flowers will open up. You do lose vase life the longer you hold things in the cooler. So we were doing testing with our daffodils this year, and we held them dry in our cooler for 4 weeks. It was a full 30 days. And when we went to pull them out and put them in water, they lasted like 3.5 to 4 days. It was a pretty good amount of time for especially a daffodil, right? They don't last too awfully long to begin with. But one thing you'll notice is when they start to go after being held like that in a cooler, they go quick. So it was like night versus day. I think we went home one day from work and the flowers looked good in the vase, and when we came back to work the next morning, they were like dead brown and crispy. So you have to be careful with stuff like that, because if you're selling them for an event or a wedding, you cannot have the flowers dying like that on a Saturday for a wedding. Your florist will probably never buy from you again. We keep all of our spring flowers in our coolers at like 35 to 37 degrees. So even dry stored daffodils. All right, I've answered this question. It went back to the beginning. All right. Oh, I went the wrong direction. Maybe that's all the questions I have. So if you have any other questions for me, let me know. But again, I started growing flowers in 2017, and I found Lisa Mason Ziegler in the Gardener's Workshop Farm really early on, thank goodness, because I used to watch Lisa on Facebook and just learn tips and tricks and kind of get a sense of like what's supposed to be going on during a year, a whole season on a flower farm. And then she launched her online courses, and I have benefited so much from all of the different courses that she offers. I'm not just saying that. I have taken almost all of them, and they're all so good. She just released, we used to have to wait to sign up for her course, but she just released her course on demand on the gardenersworkshopfarm.com. And if you want to learn the basics, the whole season, how to start a flower farming business, what you need to do as far as paperwork to become a legal business entity, and then the tools and supplies and the certain varieties of seeds that you need, all that good stuff I learned from taking the online course, the Beginning Basics with Lisa Ziegler. So definitely check that out. Now that it's on demand, you can literally get off of the Instagram Live right now and go sign up and start learning how to do and how to be a flower farmer just like I am. And maybe in 7 years, you'll be standing in front of a peony field just like I am. I had no idea where this was going to take me, the direction that we were going to go in. And as I started growing flowers and just saw more and more people locally, other florists and for event florists for weddings and the wholesalers, like they all want our product, and I've never been able to grow enough. And so there's definitely room for more people to be growing flowers. Even in our area, I think we have over 30 flower farms now, and it just I'm continuously amazed at just how much people want the local flowers that we're growing. They're just so special. All right, I do have another question. Where do you grow roses, and do we grow gardenias? And we don't grow either one of those. I'm not sure. Gardenias smell amazing, but they probably don't have that long of a vase life, and so it may just not make for a good cut flower. And then roses, We choose not to grow roses here on the farm just because of all the chemicals we feel we would need to spray on them to make what people envision is the perfect rose. So when you go to the grocery store, when you look at imported roses, those have been bred and grown in South America, and they may be sprayed with tons of chemicals to look as perfect as they are, and that's just not something that we really want to get into or focus on, and so that's why we don't grow roses. In our area, humidity can cause a lot of issues with certain plants, and so part of everyone's flower farm being just a little different is learning what's going to grow best in your climate or on your farm. And there may be stuff that you really want to grow, like roses, and you may just come to find out that it's not worth your time to do that if you want to become a financially viable and successful business. Let's see if there's any other questions in the chat. Thank you all for joining here. I see one comment about Elaeagnus autumn olive is an invasive perennial and should not be grown. Well, we planted a hybridized variety, and I'm not sure. It may be sterile, it may not be. I have plants, I have a little hedgerow of it, and the florists want it like crazy, so I think we all have to make our educated decisions, and I choose to grow it, so that's what I do, and I don't apologize for growing it. If anyone's wondering, I sit on the middle of the fence of a lot of stuff. I know some plants can get people upset, and sometimes they just don't have all the information, or they read something online and run with it, and I just think we're all different and we can all be friends. Okay, do peonies bloom their first year? Answered that question, and let's see. All right, I have two more. I'll answer those and then jump off. What's your favorite way to stake flower support netting? So we use netting definitely to support. Right now we're supporting our snapdragons and campanula. Campanula is starting to shoot up here on our farm. It's not blooming yet though. And so we use like the green T-post that we hammer down into the ground, and they have little ridges all the way down the post that we can easily slide the netting on and off. The problem is the price of those metal T-posts has increased like 5 times since I've started flower farming. They used to be like $1.99, and now I'm pretty sure they're like $5 or $6 a piece. So we'll, if I need, right now we have enough to do what we need to do with them, but I see a lot of people use maybe tomato stakes or wooden stakes, and I think a lot of people use different things. There's fiberglass posts that you can use also. You have to check that out, but we use metal T-posts that we just buy at our local feed and seeds or box stores. All right, and last question. If you cut daffodils when they bloom, is it possible to keep them in a cooler and rehydrate them if they just opened? This is a great question that I did not explain. Is it even not worth trying? It is not worth trying. You have to harvest your daffodils at the gooseneck stage when it's still a closed bud. If the flower has opened, it's too late to dry store them. You can still cut them and put them in water and store that in your cooler for a couple days, but once the daffodil's been opened, I would not try to hold it longer than a few days because it's just not going to hold up that much longer. So that's been our experience, and thanks again for everyone being here. If you want to follow along with me and our farm, follow us on Instagram at Petal Pickers. If you would like to ship a bouquet with flowers grown here on our farm to anywhere in the United States in the lower 48, you can do that. We ship flowers out every Wednesday for delivery on Thursday, and those bouquets just change throughout the season, as do our flower selection, and you can check all that out at petalpickers.com. And if you need dahlia tubers, those are there as well. So thanks for being here today, and I'll see you next time.